Podcast Answer Man, episode number 174.
Entertaining, educational, and encouraging content that makes a difference. This is GSPN.TV. Join the community.
Hey, this is Chris Brogan from chrisbrogan.com, and you're listening to the Podcast Answer Man.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Podcast Answer Man. My name is Cliff Ravenscraft, coming to you a little bit later this week than you're used to, but I have an excuse for that. Today, I'm going to talk about how to get an all-expenses-paid sponsorship to attend a conference of your dreams. And also, we're going to talk about PodCamp Boston 5 information. Well, folks, I am so sorry for the delay in putting this episode out for you guys, but I do have a great excuse, and let me just go ahead and get the excuse out of the way so I can get into the meat of what I want to talk to you about today. So I first want to explain to you that it is not because I have removed Podcast Answer Man from the live show schedule that this week's episode is delayed. Although I guess maybe you could argue that maybe had something to do with it. If it was on the live show schedule, perhaps I would have made myself record an episode. However, what happened is this past week was a very special week in the Ravenscraft household, as all of our children started back to school on Wednesday. With our youngest daughter, McKenna, she is in a special afternoon-only kindergarten class. This means that midday, we have to make sure that McKenna gets on the bus and, during the end of the day that she gets off the bus. As a result of that, there was some other things that Stephanie wanted to be able to do after the younger two were in school and she still had McKenna to care for. She decided, hey, I want to start working out in the morning and then run some errands and stuff like that. That's going to put Family from the Heart into a different time slot, I believe. I think we're going to have to move Family from the Heart to the afternoon. And so to move Family from the Heart in the afternoon, I had to find a time slot for it. 2 o'clock in the afternoon is the new home. And then, of course, I decided, I need to rearrange a couple other things around. And Podcast Answer Man in the future is going to be recorded on Thursdays like usual. However, it won't be recorded until after the final show of the day on live show Thursdays over at gspn.tv/live. And then behind the scenes, behind the curtains, I'll produce the Podcast Answer Man show. Now, of course, I think I mentioned last week why it is I've decided to take it off of the live show schedule. The reason is because I want to not be distracted by any means whatsoever. When I do a show like this on my own, solo, I am very tempted to read the chat room. And some people said, well, Cliff, why don't you just close the chat room and just broadcast it out anyway? Well, there is still the understanding in my mind that I am performing for a live audience. And so there's just a little added pressure. And that added pressure, I certainly don't mind in the event that I'm doing an interview or in the event that I have a co-host. But when I do a show solo, I've determined that if I want the show to sound organized or to have some coherent thoughts, then I think it's important that I'm not reading a chat conversation while speaking at the same time about a completely different subject. And that's something that was happening way too often here on Podcast Answer Man, so that's what's going on. But anyway, I do want to let you know that I was fully prepared on Friday evening to record this episode of Podcast Answer Man. But then something came in my email inbox that made me think, I should see if this pans out first, because I think this would be a perfect topic for Podcast Answer Man. And I was right. And I'm so glad that I put it off. So today's episode, I want to tell you, is going to be basically 2 topics. There are no phone calls this week. Do give us a call. Voicemail feedback hotline, 859-795-4067. Again, that phone number is 859-795-4067. Please give me a call with all your questions about podcasting, and we'll try to get those in an upcoming show. But today, I'm going to talk about how I landed an all-expenses paid trip to PodCamp Boston 5, and I'm going to explain to you why I so desperately wanted to go and participate in PodCamp Boston 5. So let's start off with talking about how is it that somebody actually can go in and get a paid sponsorship? Well, first and foremost, you let people know that you're looking for a sponsor. That's the first thing I did. And for those of you who are just now tuning in, maybe you found this episode as the result of the title of the episode on a Google result. And so I'm not going to make you go back to last week. I'm just going to play an 80-second clip here of something that I put into last week's episode. And this is, in fact, I didn't even record this into the show. I recorded this separately and remembered after the fact to put it in post-production. So here's a little note that I put into last week's episode. Hey, I need to insert this here in post-production, something I completely forgot to mention on Podcast Answer Man episode 173, and it was something that I kept making a mental note that I wanted to include in the show, is that while I was in Boston, I threw a social media tweet up and ran into Steve Garfield, a guy I met several years ago at PodCamp Boston 2. One of the things that he brought up to me was something that I had never really thought of before, and that was having sponsored events. Like, for example, for Stephanie and I to go to PodCamp Boston 5, that's a desire of ours, is to be able to go and do that. Of course, it'd be a little bit of a financial stretch for us, but I'm thinking it would be totally worthwhile. But one of the things that I had as a conversation with Steve Garfield over at stevegarfield.com was that he had mentioned that he'll oftentimes go to like a Blog World or one of these conferences, and he blogs about it and does video episodes about it and all this other stuff. And he actually has a company who will sponsor that. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't at least take the opportunity to let you guys know that there is an opportunity for any business out there who would like to sponsor Stephanie and I to go to PodCamp Boston 5 the weekend of September 25th. I would be interested in talking with you. Well, there you go. That's a clip from last week's episode where I just threw in a random, right in the middle of the show, I just added it in post-production, just a random little audio clip just to let people know that there is an opportunity to sponsor a trip for Stephanie and I to go to PodCamp Boston 5. And folks, I am excited to let you know that I was approached by not one, but two companies that had a desire to sponsor the event for Stephanie and I to attend. Now, I do want to let you know that I did accept the sponsorship of one of those companies, and I'm very proud to announce that divineoffice.org is paying all expenses for Stephanie and I to attend PodCamp Boston 5. I mean, when I say all expenses, I'm talking about round-trip airfare, hotel accommodations, meals and transportation while we're in Boston, admission to the conference itself, and get this, we're talking also, they're covering the cost of our child care. Now, Stephanie and I have 3 children, ages 5, 8, and 10, and all 3 of our children are going to be cared for by a very good, close, personal friend of ours in our home, and of course, we're paying her well for that. And so all of these expenses, everything that I've just mentioned, all of it being sponsored and provided for by divineoffice.org. Now, you might be asking yourself, and of course, I'm not going to tell you the actual dollar number, but I mean, do this. Look up hotel accommodations in Boston for 3 nights. Look up airfare from Cincinnati to Boston, 2 seats round trip. Of course, you probably have no clue how much it costs for very good, high quality childcare, but we have high quality childcare for 4 days: Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And meals and transportation. I mean, you add all of that up. It's not. I mean, we're not talking $200 here. We're talking that it's a sizable amount that I threw out to them. And so you might ask yourself, okay, wow, that is unbelievable. It's like, and I'm certain that some people are going to have the same response that they have when they hear me talk about the fact that, I'll launch a brand new podcast, and before I actually launch my first show, I want to actually secure a sponsorship. And I secure a sponsorship with a 3-month or a 6-month agreement right up the front, and it's a flat fee monthly, regardless on the number of downloads. In fact, that I don't even promise you that I'll ever give you any download numbers. What I do hope is that I can tell you what I believe is going to be the benefits for your company, and that I never do a sponsorship that's not a complete win-win. And folks, this is the key. I want you to understand this. It must be a win-win situation, Are Stephanie and I going to win in this sponsorship? You better believe it. Childcare, high quality childcare in our home for 4 days from a close, personal, trusted friend. Absolutely. 4 days in Boston and all, it's a total win for us. I could not, in good conscience, accept this money if I did not believe that the win in the column for divineoffice.org was not equal to or greater than the win in our column. And this is something that I'm absolutely certain of. I have no doubt in my mind that this is a complete and total win in their favor as well. And not only that, but in the long run, if you think about, I guess, the long tail of this, I have no doubt that the win column, I mean, if we were to balance this out on a scale, it's going to be so heavily weighted in their favor. And that's the way I want my sponsorships to be. Okay, that is always how I want my sponsorships to be. So let me see here. Many of you may have noticed that I was up late Friday evening, and at 1:30 a.m., I had put out a Twitter message that said I just spent 3.5 hours writing an email to a potential sponsor for our trip to PodCamp Boston 5. So 3.5 hours that I spent on writing the proposal of why I think it is a complete and utter win for Divine Office to sponsor us in this way. And let me tell you what I offered to them. All right. The first thing that I offered to them, the very first thing, is that number one, I'm going to be creating a blog post. That really, if you want to call it a page, you can. But the way that I have my site set up, it's going to be a blog post, and it'd be really no different than a page. But it's going to be a blog post where people can simply go in and type in gspn.tv/divineoffice. And if they go to gspn.tv/divineoffice, they're going to see this particular post. Now, the blog post is going to include a video. I'm going to do a YouTube video. I'm not sure how long it's going to be. It's somewhere going to probably be between 5 and 15 minutes because it's a YouTube video. But anyway, this blog post is going to include this YouTube video, and it's going to explain how I met Dan and how basically he was recently responsible for sponsoring the podcasting track over at CNMC, the Catholic New Media celebration that I was just in Boston for. And basically, I'm going to explain how this is such a financial blessing to Stephanie and I personally, as well as a blessing to us professionally, because of the fact that, this is going to be, it's going to mean a lot for us in our business because of the connections and the networking that will happen there. And I just know this from it's a guarantee from my experience of all PodCamps that I've ever attended, or all speaking engagements for that matter. Anyway, I'm also going to explain in this video what it means to me that Stephanie is actually going to be able to attend the event. You see, I've actually been able to attend a lot of PodCamps. Stephanie was blessed I was blessed to have Stephanie join me for PodCamp NYC 2, which was, I think that was my second PodCamp experience. And that was largely and thanks to my great friend Chef Mark Tafoya, which, by the way, you guys should check out. Just go over to twitter.com/chefmark with a K and check him out. He's a close personal friend of mine. He basically allowed Stephanie and I to stay in his apartment while we were in New York. He chauffeured us around town, giving us the tour and everything like that. And not only that, but at the time I was just launching my business and I was planning on making the financial investment to come, but Stephanie was not going to come. But instead, when I told Mark about that, Mark's a very close personal friend of mine, and Mark says, "No, I'm not having that. I've got lots of airline miles built up. I'm getting Stephanie a ticket. She's coming." and Stephanie certainly wasn't going to refuse that, and I wasn't going to refuse it. And so Chef Mark really was responsible for making that happen for us, and that was totally awesome. But since then, I've been to a lot of other PodCamp experiences, and Stephanie has not been with me because, well, mostly it's usually due to the childcare. But when it comes to a trip like Boston, this isn't cheap. I mean, to fly to Boston, stay in a hotel, eating out, and then childcare, but doing all that, such a long distance, that's a lot of money, and certainly worthwhile. But I just got back from a trip to Boston, and Boston was so beautiful, and I'm like, I really wish Stephanie could be here. And so I was thinking, man, it would be great if I could take Stephanie to PodCamp Boston. Well, in this video, I'm going to explain all of that, and then of course I will take just a few moments to explain what Divine Office is and what product that they have that you could purchase, and as a way of saying thank you, or at least checking it out and seeing what you think there. But so anyway, that's what's going to be in the YouTube video. The blog post is also going to include a little written synopsis, just maybe a couple sentences summarizing what's in that video for people who maybe don't want to click and watch the video. Some people actually like to read blogs. I don't understand it because I don't like to read blogs myself. But anyway, so we're gonna have a little written synopsis of what's in the video, just a little, hey, this is want to thank them for sponsoring, blah blah blah, and of course the blog is also going to mention and have a paragraph or two about Divine Office and what they are, what ministry their ministry is all about, and also have linked to products, their iPhone and iPad apps, which it's an iPhone app now, but it's getting ready to be upgraded to a universal app. So I'm really excited about the fact that they're getting ready to launch, to give a free update, I believe, to folks to get that to be a universal app for iPad. Anyway, so I'm very excited about the blog post that we're going to create. Now, here's the deal. This blog post, in my mind, is the critical ingredient to the sponsorship. And not to mention the fact that only having a single sponsor is a critical ingredient as well. I was approached by a second company. I turned it down after I was already given the green light from Dane over at Divine Office. And so I think it was important for me to only accept this single sponsorship because of the way that I think that I'm going to bring brand awareness to Divine Office and to the iPhone/iPad application that they have, that they're going to be promoting with this. And this blog post is a critical ingredient also because rather than go on for 5 to 10 minutes about their sponsorship, like a certain podcaster that I happen to love, I love you, Leo Laporte, but your sponsored messages are just way out of control. Anyway, rather than go on for 5 or 10 minutes about my sponsor anytime I mention them, I would like to be able to simply say, hey, special thanks to Dane over at divineoffice.org for their sponsorship. And folks, check out, if you get a chance sometime, please go over to gspn.tv/divineoffice so you can find a way to thank them personally on our behalf for making this a possibility. So, in fact, why not go ahead and pause the recording either now or at the end of this episode? Why don't you do me a favor and head over to gspn.tv/divineoffice and leave a comment in the blog post area there and just say, hey, Dane, thank you so much for making it possible for Cliff and Stephanie to go to PodCamp Boston 5 and for the fact that they're going to be able to bring us all this wonderful coverage and so that we can, live, that event vicariously through Cliff and Stephanie. If that's something that you're excited about, do me a favor, head over to gspn.tv/divineoffice and leave a comment there. And as I'm recording this on Sunday, August 22nd at 9:16 p.m., right now that blog post does exist, but it is a placeholder blog post. It's got just the bare bones. And I actually have a phone call with Dane tomorrow morning, Monday, August 23rd. And after I get off the phone with him, that's when I'm looking to start creating the YouTube video and get some additional information. And so by midweek, there should be a full blog post there. But if you're getting this thing hot off the presses because, well, by golly, you've been waiting for 3 days for this episode to come out, do me a favor, just go on over and go ahead and leave the comment. And if you get a chance, go ahead and click the link there and check out the application that he's got available. Like I said, there's a bare bones blog post there. But here's the deal: that blog post in my I guess my pitch, if you will, is that this is the critical ingredient. This is where I'm going to be bringing people back to over and over and over again. So in fact, so the first thing they get with this sponsorship is the blog post. All right. Now, here is how all of this is going to come together. Number one, I'm going to be talking up the PodCamp Boston 5 in so many of our podcasts on a weekly basis leading up to the trip. You know, I've got Podcast Answer Man. I'm going to be talking about it in Social Media Serenity. I'll probably talk about it in Help I Got a Mac, Business Tech Weekly. I'm sure it'll come up in Family from the Heart, as Stephanie and I are planning on going to Boston and talking about our arrangements and trip, our plans and all the stuff. And so the opportunity to talk about us getting ready to go to PodCamp Boston, there's going to be at least a minimum of 7 episodes a week where it could be possible for this to come up. And I'm sure the conversation, it's going to come up quite often. And so anytime we do that, rather than go on for 5 to 10 minutes about our sponsor, you know, anytime it comes up, we'll just say, hey, special thanks to Dane over there at divineoffice.org for making this happen. If folks, please, if you haven't done so, go over to gspn.tv/divineoffice to find out how this thing happened. And please do me a favor, make sure you say thank you to them on our behalf for making this possible. And so it's that quick. It's that easy. It's that easy. Not only that, but I also told them that they're going to get a little bit of brand exposure on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn during the event. Now, I was sure to tell them that, say, listen, you know, I'm going to limit this to 1 to 2 tweets per day, although the day will be full of tweets as Stephanie and I are out there. But here's an example. Like, for example, Friday morning, I probably will send out a tweet. If it doesn't say exactly this, it'll be just like it. It'll say, we're on our way to Boston. Boston. I love that I say Boston like that now. We're on our way to Boston. Special thanks to @DivineOffice for making this possible. And then it'll have the link to gspn.tv/DivineOffice, and it'll have #PodCamp #PCB. And so, or PCB5 is the hashtag. And then, of course, there'll probably be about 10 or 15 tweets throughout the day. And then during the evening, you know, had wonderful dinner. We're back in our room, in our hotel room. Thank you @DivineOffice. And then a link to that, you know, blog post and then it'll say hashtag PodCamp #PCB5. Or actually, it'll probably just say PCB5. Instead of PodCamp. And then, of course, on Saturday, there's only one that I have planned, and it'll be probably right after my PodCamp talk. There'll be a lot of brand new followers on Twitter during my PodCamp talk. I probably will add about 50 or 60, maybe even 70 new Twitter followers right during my talk. And it's basically going to be a Twitter message that'll say something like, gave my #PodCamp or PCB5 talk, how you can make a living from podcasting about your passion. Told them about @DivineOffice and the link to that blog post. On Sunday, it'll say something like, today was another wonderful day at PodCamp Boston. Met so many awesome people. Thank you @DivineOffice with a link to the blog post. And then Monday, I'm going to wait and, you know, there'll be tweets all throughout the day. And then at the very end of the trip, I will say something like, back home safe and sound. Wow, what an amazing time in Boston. Thank you @DivineOffice for making it a reality. And then a link to the blog post. So a lot of, and by the way, this goes out to nearly 3,000 people on Twitter. I think nearly 2,000 some odd people in Facebook. I don't know how many people I have on LinkedIn. But the thing is there's also a very popular target audience for this particular ministry, DivineOffice. Now, DivineOffice is one of the products the product that they're pushing during the sponsorship is going to be the Liturgy of the Hours, which is a heavily focused Catholic tradition of praying the hours, and it's one that I'm actually going to be being a little bit more educated on because I want to learn a little bit more about this. But I know of the Liturgy of the Hours. I've been testing out and listening to the iPhone application and the iPad application, and so I'm very familiar with it to a certain degree. But I want to actually get in and understand how this came about. It is a very Catholic tradition, but what I love is that it doesn't have to. It literally can be something that folks from the Protestant faith, like myself, can participate in if they're interested in doing so. And so I'm going to be looking into a lot more of that and things. But the thing is I have a huge Catholic audience. A very huge Catholic audience. And again, folks, this is another key critical ingredient in securing a sponsor, is that you are able to reach a target audience, not just your target audience, is the target audience for that particular sponsor, within your audience. And the answer to that question is absolutely hands down. I'm going to play some audio here in just a minute. I'm going to play 2, 3 to 3.5 minute audio clips from 2 different Catholic programs that'll just show you just the type of Catholic relationships that I have. I'm not Catholic personally, but I still feel like this is a perfect fit for sponsoring this event and things like that. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. But anyway, so brand exposure on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and I will tell you that I have a ton of Catholic followers in all of those social networks. And folks, if you are listening to me and you're Catholic and you know me, I have no doubt that you're going to be so excited. As long as you have a connection to Cliff and Stephanie, I believe that you guys are going to be genuinely excited for us that we have the sponsorship, and the fact that somebody has gone out of their way to create such a valuable offer. I mean, a very generous offer that you'll say, wow, I want to thank them. And if nothing else, at the very least, you'll go and leave a comment, or you will, you might even actually purchase that, especially if you're Catholic and you want to be more disciplined in your prayer life, in the using of the Liturgy of the Hours. So I'm really excited about that. So Twitter, brand exposure in the social networks. Here's another one, YouTube video updates. Stephanie and I both have iPhone 4s, and so I'm sure we're going to be creating and uploading a ton of YouTube videos as we're there. I want to try to make sure that you guys have the benefit of living vicariously through us, and so I'm going to try to get these videos to upload to you the best way possible, and we'll be uploading those into our video channels. And once we do that, when we record those videos, at the end of the video, at the very end of the video, we'll certainly say, hey, special thing, this coverage brought to you and sponsored by divineoffice.org. Do me a favor, please head over to gspn.tv/divineoffice to leave a comment and thank them for making this coverage possible. Something really brief, something quick at the end, but something that is going to drive home this brand. And it's not going to be in an overly sold fashion, I can tell you that. It might sound like it's a lot here in this episode, and it is a lot here in this episode, but this episode is all about how to get the sponsorship and how I got the sponsorship. All right. The next thing I offered to him is that, hey, I am going to be speaking at PodCamp Boston, and I'm actually going to be talking about how you can earn an income from podcasting about your passion. And I can guarantee you that I am going to mention about, I'm right there, the entire audience. I'm going to tell them that, hey, I am here from Cincinnati with my wife on an all expenses paid trip, on an all expenses paid basis, including childcare for our 3 children ages 5 to 10 for 4 days in our home. All of this completely paid by our sponsor. And I might even explain a little bit about how I made that happen and stuff like that. So those people are I'm going to, of course, tell them to go check out gspn.tv/divineoffice to see how this all came about. And of course, I'm going to tell them to come back and listen to episode number 174 of Podcast Answer Man. And so for those of you who heard me in September at PodCamp Boston 5, here I am speaking to you in the future. I want to say thank you for coming and listening to this episode, and I hope that you stay subscribed. And I, of course, want to encourage you to check out my podcastanswerman.com website, and please look under the services tab at the top and see the services that I offer, and also be sure to check out podcastanswerman.com/products for all the training video tutorial products that I have. Hey, I'm a sales guy. Forgive me. Anyway, so my PodCamp Boston talk, certainly he's going to get some brand exposure there. There's also going to be some face-to-face conversations. My friends, let me tell you, when I know this because of the type of person that I am. I hope none of this sounds arrogant. I'm a very confident person in the things that I do because I'm very passionate about what I do, and I just know some things from experience. I know that when I have conversations with people are going to hear about the fact that I actually make a full-time living, a career out of doing my passion, out of podcasting. And one of the things that I know will come up in those conversations, because people are going to, I know the questions people are going to ask, because I always get asked the same questions, which is great. Trust me, I love it. I love that people ask me to share my story, because I love to share my story. And so I know people are going to ask me. And one of the things that's going to come up is that, hey, you think that's cool? Stephanie and I are here this trip is not costing us a penny, and let me tell you about it. And I'm going to tell them, I say, listen, you need to do me a favor. Go to gspn.tv/divineoffice and go and check this video out. Check out this blog post that I put together. And if you have any question about whether or not that has any kind of, so Cliff, you're going to talk to a handful of people at PodCamp Boston, and they're going to maybe talk to, you're telling me they're going to talk to other people about you. And I'm telling you, yes, absolutely, hands down. I'm going to talk to people, and by the end of the PodCamp experience, by the end of PodCamp Boston 5, there will be people by the end of PodCamp Boston 5 that I never had the chance to meet personally, that I never had the chance to shake their hand, I never had the chance to speak a single word or even make eye contact with. There's going to be that many people there. It's totally awesome. Let me tell you. There are going to be people who I've never met that by the end of PodCamp Boston 5, that weekend, there's going to be a large number of people who will have heard my name, will have heard that I do this full-time as my career, and will have heard that in fact my wife and I were there that weekend completely 100% all expenses paid from a sponsor. And that I would be willing to say that a lot of those people will actually hear the name Divine Office or Podcast Answer Man, and they'll come back and they're eventually going to hear all of this. Now, Cliff, okay, you're saying to yourself, Cliff, you're dreaming. Seriously, dude, you are so caught up in yourself. You are so narcissistic. You are so full of yourself. You don't even see how deep you're in. I mean, seriously, nobody does that, Cliff. And so I imagine that has to be what some of you are thinking, because you know what? If I didn't know it to be true, I would be right there with you. I'm like, what do people see in me? I mean, I'm just a normal, okay, not so normal, but I'm just an average guy. Maybe not so average, but I don't know. I'm just me. I'm just Cliff Ravenscraft. I don't understand what the appeal is, but I know that when I talk with people, when I have conversations with people talk about me. So what I'm going to do for the next 8 minutes or so, I'm going to let you kind of just hear what happens when I sit down and have a conversation with somebody. And so here is a couple. Their name is Mac and Catherine. And in fact, I only know that Mac and Catherine talked about me because they actually have a podcast where they have the opportunity to actually, where I actually have the opportunity to hear what they say about me. And folks, I can tell you right now, based upon what you're about ready to hear, I'm certain that my name probably came up in conversation before they ever got back home and before they actually hit record on the microphone. And just so you can hear what they said when they finally did get around to hitting record on the microphone, here is what they shared on their podcast, which, by the way, reached thousands of people.
Then you get so fired up when you're there.
Yeah.
And meeting all these new people and so many people with so many great ideas.
Yeah, it recharges your batteries.
It recharges your batteries until you get home and you're like, oh yeah, I got to go to work. Full-time job. Mac's got to go back to work on Monday. It's just
shut up.
Back to the grind. Like you said, back to the grindstone. And it can get a little disheartening. I mean, we got to sit across from Cliff Ravenscraft at dinner one night. And for those of you who don't know who he is, and I don't really know who he is, I don't listen to his podcast, but we got to hear, because he does like 10 podcasts.
10 maybe on the low end.
All he does is podcasts.
He has gone professional.
Right.
He's a professional podcaster and podcasting consultant.
Right.
And he has people pay for like premier subscriptions to his podcast, and he charges for an hourly rate for helping others set up theirs. And he used to be like an insurance salesman, and so that's a very inspirational story. And he's a man of faith. He's not Catholic.
He's not Catholic, but he is. He
appreciates our faith.
Yeah.
And at the same table was Mark Shea and Greg and Jennifer Willits. And so we're all just sitting around having the most wonderful conversation, hearing each other's stories, joking and laughing and eating lobster. And it was fantastic. It was such a great night.
Yeah.
But the founders dinner.
But what I was going to say about Cliff is that it was inspirational to hear that because he really had to take a leap of faith. I mean, he had a very well-paying job. He had a wife. I think they have a couple of kids.
Mm-hmm.
And
he had to sell the kids and the wife and everything.
He did, and now he's just all by himself again now. But I mean, he took a leap of faith. His wife and his dad, who he worked for, or his father-in-law, but maybe it was his dad, said, "Look,
it's his dad.
You're miserable. You're absolutely miserable. Go and do this podcast. I mean, go and do that. Just go and do it." And he didn't know how he's going to make
any money.
He didn't know how he was going to pay the bills,
but he made it work.
He did.
He worked really hard at it.
Yes.
It didn't happen by accident.
Right. He said he would work like 14 and 15 hours a day just doing podcasts. That's all he did all the time. But now, I mean, there's a good reason why he can charge a consulting fee for podcasting, because he knows what he knows what he's talking about. Mm-hmm. And it's because, I mean, those of you who've been listening to us since we started this, Max struggled with his job, and I'm a mostly stay-at-home mom, but I work and I like the money that I make when I'm working. And I like sort of the stability of having that job. But just the idea of just giving all of that stability up to take a leap in new media, whatever that may be. And we've done videography in the past, in our town for weddings and stuff. And so we have some background in that and know that we could do it, especially if it was available to us as a full-time thing. And Mac and I, and I think Mac more than me has a lot of just really creative ideas and wants to use that, you more than me. And, but how do you...
We'll get to that later.
Okay.
All right, so there you go. That is, that was, let's see, I think it was 3 minutes and 10 seconds of Mac and Catherine talking about me in their podcast, which, by the way, you can find at CatholicInASmallTown.com. CatholicInASmallTown.com. I encourage you to check out their podcast. In fact, it's a hilarious podcast, and I had known of Mac and Catherine for a long time. First time I ever had a chance to finally meet them. Obviously, Catherine says, "I've never listened to the guy's podcast. I really don't know the guy," but it was so cool to get to meet them and have dinner with them, and that was wonderful. And but here's the deal. Did you hear how much they shared? I mean, how much of my story did they share? And it wasn't they shared it because, man, this Cliff guy was so annoying. There was a sense of inspiration there. And by the way, if Mac and Catherine, if you guys are listening to this, and I hope that that you'll be alerted to this if I don't alert you myself, that you've been featured for 3 minutes and 10 seconds in Podcast Answer Man episode 174. Mac, man, let me tell you, you have everything it takes to go and do something creative on your own and make a living with it. And I would tell you what, man, it is not easy, and it doesn't happen overnight, but you, my friend, have what it takes. This guy's keynote address that he gave at the Catholic New Media Celebration was out of this world awesome, and he did like an impersonation of a Steve Jobs keynote, and I'm not kidding you, it was dead on. It was amazing. It was awesome. And the guy's just naturally funny and hilarious. And I have no doubt that I think if I had his skill set, if I had his personality, if I had his talents that he has, I could probably think off the top of my head at least 5-10 different things that he could do to generate income and make a full-time living from it. So Mac, Catherine, keep dreaming and keep moving forward. All right, so here's another one. Greg and Jennifer Willits. Now, Greg and Jennifer, you can find them at gregandjennifer.com, by the way. They started out as podcasters on SQPN as well. which is the StarQuest Production Network. That's the Catholic podcasting network founded by Father Roderick, a great personal friend of mine. And anyway, Catholics Next Door, what happened was Greg and Jennifer were doing a podcast called The Rosary Army. It was basically Greg and Jennifer talking about their family life and just the things that they were passionate about. Very great show. I listened to it a lot, and it was really a great source of inspiration for our Family from the Heart podcast that I do with Stephanie on a weekly basis. Anyway, their show got so much notice and notoriety that they were actually hired by Sirius Satellite Radio and XM, Sirius Satellite and XM Satellite Radio. Well, actually, they were hired by the Catholic Channel on Sirius /XM Satellite Radio. So anyway, the Catholic Channel heard about Greg and Jennifer, hired them, or brought them in for some test run shows and stuff like that, and decided to offer them a full-time gig doing the easy for me to say, the Catholics Next Door with Greg and Jennifer Willits. And this is a show that's on Monday through Friday, 3 hours a day, and they broadcast to the world, or well, I guess through the United States. They broadcast on satellite radio all that time. And not only that, but they also broadcast to the world with a weekly podcast that gives kind of like the best of their show. So here's the deal. But I told you that Mac and Catherine, after meeting me at PodCamp for the very first time, went around and had conversations about me and the things that I had shared. And so, and by the way, you can bet both the audio clip that you just heard and the one you're about to hear right now, were these included in my the email that I took 3.5 hours to formulate to my potential sponsor, or actually not my potential sponsor, my in reality sponsor, divineoffice.org. You better believe these were included in there. And who are these? These are these two audio clips absolutely have every single thing to do with Divine Office's target audience. And so here is me being talked about on a major Catholic channel on Sirius Satellite and XM Satellite Radio, and the podcast as well. And in fact, I got this audio clip from the podcast. And so this, the number of thousands of people, I can't even imagine how many people it hit. But here's 3.5 minutes of Greg and Jennifer.
And then on the other side, the podcasting side, our good friend Father Roderick Von Hogan, who we used to work with when we were helping to run StarQuest Production Network, he was there along with a longtime virtual friend, Cliff Ravenscraft. Now, Cliff is pretty cool. Cliff has this an organization called GSPN, the General Speaking Production Network, and it's pretty much him and his wife. And they've been doing this for a few years now, and it grew to the point where he quit his job in insurance and went full-time. And Cliff, God bless the man. I mean,
let's just repeat that. He went full-time recording podcasts, which is basically, if for those of you who do not know what a podcast is, it's basically an individual who has basic recording abilities to their home PC or home Macintosh computer, and they will record and produce their own radio show sounding MP3 file. And they could base it on any topic of their desire. It could be just an educational-based podcast, or it could be about a television show, just commentary on a favorite television show. I mean, the topics are limitless. And Cliff Ravenscraft and his wife were very good at creating a whole bunch of podcasts.
I mean, they literally create shows about everything, but that's not the only thing he does. That's one part of what he does now, but he now offers consulting for people who want to learn how to use this new media as well. But the thing that I loved about Cliff being there this weekend at the Catholic New Media Celebration is that Cliff has been very involved in Catholic New Media, and yet he's not Catholic.
Right.
As a matter of fact, he was an assistant pastor in a Protestant church for a while. I mean, that's but he still is he's so enamored with what the Catholic world is doing in regards to new media. And he and Father Roderick have a friendship, and he's been a big part of Catholic New Media for years, and he's not even Catholic. And I just find
awesome.
I find that so fascinating. And so here's Cliff, and I was giving him a hard time this past weekend. He even went to Mass with us yesterday at Catholic TV. I'm just like, God bless you, man. God bless you.
That's right. He was there. And after a while, you forget. you just sort of think that he's Catholic too, but he's not. He just loves being with us, and we love that he wants to be with us. And so all the more reason to embrace our Protestant brothers and sisters so that we can, all participate in very similar goals and similar initiatives. And the fact that he does a podcast with Father Roderick Von Hogan, a Catholic priest on the other side of the world, really says something about a person. And we're just so pleased to actually get to meet him in person. And that was a lot of what happened over the course of this weekend. Many of the friendships that had been created were created through these online communities, some of them that were only established by SQPN, some by other podcasts. But it was a chance to finally put a real face to the virtual name and actually get to learn a little bit about the person behind the name. And that's what made this weekend really extra special.
I want to get Cliff on the show just to talk about his own journey. He has a pretty fantastic journey, and a lot of it has to do with huge trust in God as well, that God is in control, God is leading him where he needs to go, and God is taking him there. And then just this weekend, the opportunity to hang out with him at the Catholic New Media Celebration was pretty fantastic.
There you go. So that was 3.5 minutes on their show, and I want to let you know that the day I heard that, the very next day, I was on the Catholics Next Door with Greg and Jennifer Willits, and I was featured on their show for a full 20 minutes or so, and got to tell my entire story, and the amount of publicity that they gave my consulting business and everything else was just out of this world. And Greg and Jennifer, I love you guys. I do. And not just because you talked about me on your show. I've loved you guys since the day I first found your podcast. And it was an honor for me to be able to have dinner with you while I was at PodCamp, or while I was in Boston with everybody there at SQPN and CNMC. The honor was all mine. And but here's the deal. Now I played those. I didn't play. I attached those audio files in this email, this proposal to my sponsor. But do you see how much I am offering? Now, of course, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. It took many years to get to the place where I'm in the position now where I can go to a sponsor without releasing my first episode and say, here's what I can tell you from my experience. I can show you where this has happened in the past. I can give you figures. I can give you numbers of what has happened. I can tell you about how long it takes before people start paying attention, how many times they have to hear it before they really take in. I can really tell you that I only accept sponsors where I believe that my personal relationship with my audience is going to cause people to want to turn around and thank you and to benefit you in return for benefiting us. I know all of these things. So if you think that you're going to listen to Podcast Answer Man episode number 174 and immediately go out and grab a sponsor, maybe. Have you been doing this for 4 or 5 years, 3 or 4 years? Once you've been doing something for 3 or 4 years, I'm thinking about my friend Eric Fisher. He's been doing a lot of things for several years. He's got some relationships built. Eric, I believe you could pull something like this off, my friend. Some of you are out there. Some of my clients, you've just launched a podcast here in 2010. Probably not going to pull this off right off the bat. Okay, take some time, build some relationships. The only thing is here, and this is a key ingredient for me. All of these relationships that I have, I never built them for the purpose of cashing in one day. And you have to avoid that. If you're building relationships and you're building an audience just so you have bigger numbers, it doesn't work. People, your audience won't respond the same way that I do. I happen to know that there is one podcast that I have, and I have one sponsorship, and I can tell you right now, 65% of my audience, and I am not kidding you, I am not exaggerating, 65% of my audience purchased on a regular basis from my sponsor. 65%. So it's big stuff here, okay? Big stuff. All right. The other thing is I told him, I said, hey, if that's not enough, just so you know, I'm going to be writing books. I'm going to be going on speaking circuits in the future. I got some big things already in the works for 2012. And you can imagine the story about, Divine Office sponsoring my first official trip to go on one of these things. Your story is going to be told. And also, we talked about I told him about the fact that we're going to be thanking him each time we mention before we go to PodCamp Boston, but also there's going to be a lot of shows and a lot of time. And even today I talk about some of the PodCamp experiences I've had in the past, and anytime in the future, it's just going to be natural for me to just say, hey, I remember, well, first of all, when we get back, we're going to talk about PodCamp Boston 5 and we'll talk about our experiences, and we'll naturally include the talk about thanking thanking Divine Office for that, and having them go to gspn.tv/Divine Office, that blog post. But even in the future, I could even see 4 or 5 years in the future, just randomly saying, hey, and I remember a conversation I had at PodCamp Boston 5, which, by the way, Divine Office, thank you for sponsoring that. If you guys never heard of that story, you need to go back and listen to episode 174 of Podcast Answer Man. So I can see this is huge. This is huge, and I will tell you, I can tell you that my sponsor, Divine Office, Dane, he did not have to think twice. When I did. I spent 3.5 hours putting the email together, but when he read the email, I laid it out in such a way it says, "Listen, I hope you can understand. The money, the dollar figure that I've thrown out to you." It's a hefty dollar figure. Yeah, and I actually broke down. I said, here's the cost. I think it's actually a conservative number, but and it is, trust me, it's a very conservative number, but still it's a big number. It's a big number. And I said, but I really believe, given the connections that I have, given the experience that I have with, people going and speaking about the things that I share with them, about my career, about how sponsors come about, and I know that Divine Office is going to get a lot of recognition out of this, and rightfully so. I really want people to understand I am very appreciative of Divine Office for doing this, and especially for those of you who are from, that are Catholic, that follow me. Folks, they have been a huge blessing and an answer to prayer, and that's, of course, you'll get a lot more of the personal feel for how I feel about this when you go to gspn.tv/Divine Office, and by midweek, that YouTube video is up there. Anyway, awesome stuff. So, folks, that is how I got my sponsor. And had I had any experience with this before? Absolutely not. I had no experience with trying to land a sponsor for an event. And I will say this. The sponsorship for this one event is twice as expensive as a monthly sponsorship of some of my other shows. All right, so there you go. And this is a one weekend event, and it just gives you a feel of some of the things that are possible when you pursue your passion, when you engage with an audience, when you build a community, when you do things that give a ton of value to other people, and you have a genuine desire to help others. And oh gosh, there are so many other values and principles that are included, but I hope that you get where I'm coming from on this. So, the big deal here. What's the big deal? What's the big deal about PodCamp Boston 5? I mean, seriously, it's just another PodCamp, right? Wrong. First of all, if you have never heard of a PodCamp before, please go to podcamp.org. Podcamp.org. Go there, check it out, and you'll see that there's a ton of information about PodCamp. And these things are worldwide. I mean, this has been going on for a very, very long time. And I'm going to go ahead and start my ending music here so that I can wrap this thing up. But the other things I want to say about PodCamp Boston 5, and if you are anywhere near this place, folks, you should come. You should so come. All right? Boston is a major social media hub on the East Coast. I mean, you've got friends like folks like my friends Steve Garfield over at stevegarfield.com, Chris Brogan over at chrisbrogan.com. Thank you for the intro, by the way, Chris. Just so many other awesome people in Boston. If I start naming names, I'm going to leave them all out, so don't want to do that. But anyway, first, Boston is the place where PodCamp got started. It's the birthplace of PodCamp. I was blessed enough to attend PodCamp Boston 2, and I'm very delighted to say that I'm going back to PodCamp Boston 5. Boston is a beautiful city, and I'm so glad I get to go back for a third time, and this time with my wife. And now that I've been there twice, I can show her around, and I'm very excited about that. Also, PodCamp Boston is a 2-day PodCamp event. And my friends, there is nothing like it. 1-day PodCamps, you can't even compare. All right? Our PodCamp, 1-day PodCamp events, are they worth going to? Yeah, they are. They are, for me anyway. But they're nothing like a 2-day PodCamp event. PodCamp Boston and PodCamp NYC, 2 of the best PodCamps I've ever been to. I don't think anything will ever live up to them unless you're a 2-day event. You have to be 2-day to live up to them. So here's why. More people are going to travel further distances to attend a 2-day event. When I went to PodCamp Boston 2, there were people from the UK, from the Netherlands, from Scotland's in the UK, from Germany, from all over the world, from Canada, from all over the United States. People travel far distances for a 2-day event that they will not travel to for a 1-day event. Single-day events, hardly anybody shows up to the pre-PodCamp party. And on single-day events, hardly anyone sticks around after PodCamp to go to the evening party. Basically, people come in just before the event, and then they leave at the end of the day. It's horrible. It is horrible. That's the only thing I despise about PodCamp 1-day events. Anyway, 2-day events, both the pre-party and the official PodCamp party, are highly attended. And of course, networking and socializing, these are the highlights of any PodCamp, but specifically these 2-day events. It's not all about the sessions, at least not for me. Some of the sessions will be really great. Most of the sessions, or at least let's just say this, how about several of the sessions are going to be absolutely horrible. I plan on actually spending more time in the hallways than I do in the sessions themselves. I plan to meet as many people as possible. The parties are great places to get to know people, and I'm looking to find the right dinner party. Last time I went to a dinner party, I stayed until 3 o'clock in the morning in a back room of a restaurant with a bunch of people who I consider to be very close friends today. Anyway, it's an enriching experience. I hope to see you there. And do me a favor, head over to gspn.tv/divineoffice and say thank you to Dane for making it possible for us. God bless you all. Until next time, join the community.